I am Vinnie Tortorich. Folks, your good intentions have been stolen, but don't worry. I'm here to help you get them back. You may be soft and succulent at the beginning of this process, but hang in there. Before long, you will be lean and mean, guaranteed. Just like the woman on the other mic, you know what it is. It's Friday. And there's no, well, sometimes we do a listener call-in show on Friday. We will do that. But today, we have a luminary. Yeah, this woman, she's... I can't wait to just start digging around with this woman. When I say digging, I do mean digging, because on top of everything else, she's an anthropologist. So I'm sure there's some digging somewhere in the background. But she also works for a company that takes almost as much grief as I do, Weston A. So we'll find out what she does over there. And she has a podcast. I think the podcast is called Wise Traditions Podcast. I could be wrong about that, but she can tell us all about it. Folks, I'm talking about Hilda Labrada Gore. Yeah. There she is. Hilda, did I get any of your introduction correct?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I love that the crowd went wild there, Vinnie. Thank you so much for having me. I do have a caveat.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. They'll keep going wild for you.
I appreciate that. But I do have a caveat. I call myself an experiential anthropologist because I don't have a degree in anthropology, but I do love learning from cultures around the world. And I've traveled so much. I figure my degree is kind of in the school of hard knocks, just going around and finding out. Basically, to dive off of what you said, I do make the podcast Wise Traditions for the Weston A. Price Foundation. And you may know this, but Dr. Weston A. Price was this dentist researcher in the 1930s who traveled the world looking for the healthiest people on the planet. And I was like, I want to follow in his footsteps. And so that's what I'm doing by going all over the place and seeing what health traditions can we learn about that are still being held on to today.
I'm glad you cleared that up because, sometimes early on in this podcast, like I wouldn't look up the guest and they would say Dr. So-and-so. And then I would get them on and they were a chiropractor. Now, I don't mind chiropractors calling themselves doctors, but you need to distinguish whether you're an MD or a DO with your actual medical. As I always say, if you're on the airplane flight and someone's having a heart attack, if the captain says, is there a doctor on board? A chiropractor now has to sit on his or her hands, right? They can't get up and do anything. They're not qualified to do that. So I always have people tell me whether they're a PhD or an MD or a DO or a chiropractor, which, by the way, there's one guy that comes on his show. He's a great chiropractor, and he wrote a great book about the heart. God, his name is slipping my mind now. Stephen Hussey.
Oh, I know him. Stephen Hussey, sure.
Super smart guy, and I'll have him on my show any day of the week. His book is amazing. So I'm not pissing on chiropractors whatsoever. They do a lot of good work out there. But when they hold themselves up as MDs and they're not, that's when I go, come on, dude, you got to tell us. We need to know who you are up front.
Yes. But speaking of the heart, did you know that I was born with a birth defect in my heart?
No, really?
Yeah. So this is kind of what got me going and the interesting and sparking my interest in health and wellness, because I wanted to be as strong and as healthy for as long as possible, and then to help other people do the same. But basically, when I was born, the doctors detected a heart murmur. So there was a hole between the lower two ventricles, and the doctors are like, oh my gosh, this isn't good. Babies with this condition are called blue babies because the blood doesn't oxygenate properly.
Right.
And so I had open heart surgery like Stephen Hussey. He had his maybe after a heart attack or something, or he had a heart attack. For me, I had open heart surgery when I was 9 years old, Vinnie. Wow. So it was very scary, but it also made me want to stay healthy so I could stay as far away from hospitals as possible, because I was like, this is not fun. This is scary. I didn't like it. And so the rest is history, as they say.
Well, that's what this podcast is all about. Listen, we can, people think, oh, I can abuse my body and then go, and at some point there'll be a drug to fix it, or I'll end up in the hospital and fix it. We're not a car, right? We're not mechanical. And, if you end up in the hospital with a heart attack, there's a good chance you can die if you're having a heart attack on the way to the hospital. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. I hate
Oh,
using that term survivor,
yeah.
but so people go, "Oh, you hate doctors," and I'm saying, no, doctors have literally saved my life twice,
Yes.
and I love doctors. When I've had broken legs, broken arms, I played football through college. I've broken a lot of things. Doctors have fixed me. I have
Mm-hmm.
nothing against doctors. What I'm trying to tell everyone is you don't want to be on a first name basis with your doctor. That is not a healthy way to live,
Yes.
right? And I feel that that's where we are now.
It's really true. We've outsourced our health on so many levels. We think everybody with the white coats and the alphabet soup after their name are worthy of our respect. Have they studied? Yes. Do they know us as well as we know ourselves? No. And so this is where I would actually caution people not to outsource their health to either allopathic or naturopathic doctors. In other words, the tracks are very similar, they're parallel. In the allopathic model, they'll give you prescriptions. If you've got, they think a bacterial or a viral infection, they'll, dole out the prescription. On the other side, they'll give you supplements or protocols. And it's fine to find a guide or someone you trust in, but the first person you need to check in with, I think, is yourself, actually. And this is one thing I learned on my travels, Vinny. When I was in Australia, this Aboriginal woman told me, we have a custom in our culture, she said, of didgeridoo. And I was like, oh, the didgeridoo? No, she wasn't, she wasn't talking about an instrument. She was like, didgeridoo, it means deep listening and being still to hear either what your intuition is telling you or what your ancestors have to say or God, or your deepest knowing, and I was like, we would all do well to stop and listen and check in to see what's going on. First and foremost, the body is on our side, designed beautifully by God. And I think the body actually communicates to us sometimes in a whisper. Like if you have a small rash, it's like, hey, something's wrong, you're reacting. But it'll scream if we don't pay attention. Like we can cover that rash with, some kind of cortisol cream or something like that. But eventually the body's like trying to get rid of something. It's trying to expel something. And sooner or later, you may find that you have digestive issues and other things going on because you're kind of covering the symptom with a Band-Aid and you're not listening to what your body's trying to tell you.
Yeah, a buddy of mine, you may know who this guy is, Pete Evans, who is from,
Yes.
I want to say Australia. He's,
Yeah.
as they call him, a presenter. And he did a movie back in 2017 that came out right before my movie, Fat, a Documentary. His was called The Magic Pill.
Yes.
And you may remember in The Magic Pill, he followed some of the Aboriginals or is it Aborigines? How do you say it? I don't want to be an ignorant person of my own.
I actually like Aboriginals because it has the word original in it,
Original in it. I don't know the correct saying for this group of people, but they live in Australia, and they're the original people who were there before the British started sending prisoners to that island to, banish them to this horrible place, right? So these Aboriginals are there. And in the movie, they're looking at current day Aborigines, right? And these
Mhm.
women, like everyone is fat. Everyone is morbidly obese. They have disease. They have everything else. And they have all these problems. So Pete Evans in the group, if I remember the movie correctly, they go in and they start teaching them how to eat the food that they're, just meat, more meat. Like they're not eating chips and sodas anymore and all this stuff. And the older ones, the ones that are even just 60 years old, they're going, oh wait, this is the way we ate as kids. What happened? Like these people live in the outback, right? You hear about the outback, where wolf took your baby, the dingo took your baby, and all this. All right, these people live that very simple lifestyle. Am I wrong about that, Hilda?
No, you're exactly right. They were living beautifully in concert with their traditions. But then, just like what happened in the United States, Native Americans were displaced and put on these reservations, and they were removed not only from their land, but some of their traditions. They were kind of almost trying to inculcate them with new ideas through education and so forth, and shifting things. I actually went when I was in Australia in 2019, Vinny. I went to a town called Manangrita, and it wasn't easy to get there, but it was a little bit like a Native American reservation in that the Aboriginal people were taken from their original lands and brought over to this place. It was one of the most depressing places I've ever been in my entire life. I could feel this like spirit of heaviness and depression among the people. They
Yeah.
literally had only one grocery store which wouldn't be bad, except it was all this like processed food, those little colored drinks. It was just a mess. And then next to it was a place called the Hasty Tasty, if that tells you anything. It was like a 7-Eleven. And it was just so sad. I'll never forget going into the 7-Eleven because I was kind of hungry. And I was like, well, I just got to eat whatever I can find here. I didn't have a fishing rod with me. So I was like, I'll just eat whatever they have. I got some fish and chips and this little Hasty Tasty. And the girl said to me, you're not from around here, are you? I was like, no, obviously, I was not from around there. And then she said, why, almost something like, why in the world did you come here? Why didn't you go someplace nice? And I was like, I mean, she could feel also the oppressive spirit.
They know where they
Yes.
are, right?
Yes. They were people that used to be hale and hearty. Dr. Price, the man I mentioned at the top, who was a researcher and dentist in the 1930s, when he went to Australia, he said, these people have the most keen eyesight, the best throwing arms. He saw them throwing spears yards and yards of distance and hitting the target of the prey they were trying to catch. Like he was marveling at their ability to see the stars. And this was because he found indigenous people groups that were still eating according to their wise traditions. And these are traditions that now people, not just the indigenous people, all of us have been separated from, unfortunately.
Right. And these women are, like I said, 60-year-olds in 2017. They were born in the late 1950s, early 1960s. They're about my age. I'm 62. And they're going, oh, yeah, we remember eating red meat and fish and all of these different dishes. And then it was all gone, right? They're all at I guess, I didn't know, they didn't mention that in the movie, but Hasty Tasty. I mean, but listen, I mean, in this country, I grew up in the swamps of Louisiana. I grew up on a bayou. And, my family I was the first generation that went to college. Well, my mom and dad, I'm lying. My mom and dad went to college, but it was very unusual for the generation before me to go to college. My mom and dad went, and it was like a struggle for them to go, right? They were just poor Italians living in the swamp.
Mm.
And now my parents were like, all of our kids will be educated and go to nice schools and the whole thing. But most of my relatives, we had hunting dogs. We had this, everything was hunting, right? Hunting. In southern Louisiana, hunting rabbit, hunting deer, hunting birds, hunting. And that was still going on, right? There was no, and that's what I wrote about in my book, Fitness Confidential. There was no fake food, right? It was almost like, and we're talking the 1970s, right?
Mm.
When you have, you hear it in songs, right? In The Wall, the album The Wall, Pink Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
What are they saying at the end of the song? You can't have any pudding if you don't eat your meat.
That's right.
Right? Pudding for the rest of the world is dessert in England.
Yes.
Right? And you can't have any dessert unless you eat your meat. I remember growing up in an Italian family where my grandmother would say, don't load up on that bread and pasta. Here, have the meatball, have the chicken. They would mix chicken and fish, everything with pasta. And they were more interested in you to get that protein in you because they grew up, they went through a depression, the 1920s, the whole thing. They didn't want any of that, right? They wanted us to have the good meat from the grocery stores, right? And then that gave way to, when you look at kids in cities today, they think peaches come in a can, if they even know what a peach is.
I know. They're so far removed. I'll never forget because I live in the city, so I actually see this quite often. But it was just a couple years ago, I saw some kids walking to school. And literally, like one kid had a bag of Cheetos in one hand, and then his little brother had like a candy bar. And I thought, I know what's happening here. It's not that their parents are intentionally, trying to deprive them of important nutrients. It's because everyone's been removed. Hunting's probably prohibited in the city where I live, actually. And so the parent gave him a couple dollars and said, grab something to eat on your way to school. They didn't want him to go to school with an empty stomach. But these traditions, like you said, Vinnie, are actually not that far removed from those who are further from kind of our education that's steering people the wrong way. I also was in Peru a few years ago, and when I was with the kids in the highlands outside of Cusco, I got to go to these mountains and meet with these small elementary school children of Quechua or Quechua extraction. They spoke Quechua in addition to Spanish. And I saw how beautifully healthy they looked. Like their cheeks were ruddy, but not because of eczema or acne. It was like because they'd gotten sunlight. And in the school cafeteria, there were still little chicken feet that the kids would gnaw on. Like they ate nose to tail. Their parents were farmers, most of them. And so they were still right there, having quinoa soup, fermented quinoa soup. It was just wild. And then later that week, I went with my friend Katita Williamson. We went around learning from people, but also sharing what we knew about wise traditions. We went to the University of Peru and Lima. And when we were talking to the students there, I could see the contrast. These kids were, learning in the classroom, but they were hunched over. They were pale. They looked, like they had poor posture and poor health. And I was like, wow, the kids, even though they're learning in these libraries and these classrooms, they are far removed from their traditions. It was very fascinating to observe.
Well, look, speaking of people and traditions, and I was going to love talking to you. I was watching Mountain Queen. It's the story of Lhakpa Sherpa. Are you familiar with her?
No.
Lhakpa, she is the only female in history to summit Mount Everest 10 times.
Wow.
And she's an athlete beyond athletic, right? And, the Sherpa people are, when you talk about indigenous people being special, they have, they're mountain goats they're the mountain goat of the human beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their hematocrit levels are off the charts. They can climb almost without without acclimating, just go to 21,000 feet, no acclimation, just go right up, right? And their hematocrit level will handle that. Well, she started working high on Mount Everest, right? And started summiting and then moved to the United States. And the reason I'm bringing her up is even after she moved to the United States, she worked at a Whole Foods, behind the meat counter somewhere, making, no car, no nothing, traveling by bus. One of the greatest athletes in the world. She gets on a bus every day and has a menial job. But she has 2 daughters, and her daughters are Americanized. And so you're looking in the movie, everyone else is trying to see if she's going to get to her 10 summits. Well, I know the end of the movie. It's like watching the Poseidon, or not the Poseidon, what's the one where
Titanic.
You know how it ends?
Yes.
I know Lhakpa's story because I've been into mountaineering my entire life. So I know she goes 10 times, but I'm watching her kids who are Americanized, and they're with the phone on the phone, with the phone on the phone, touching the phone and eating crap and the whole thing. And she's going, I wish my daughters were more. See, even having your mom be that person, right?
Yeah.
You can't stop what's going on in this country, right?
Right.
Her daughters are like disassociating with their mom, right? At the end, they do a big love fest of they all kind of come around. Okay, thanks Netflix was giving us the Hallmark ending, but we know in real life it wasn't that Hallmarky, right?
Right.
But they're
Hey.
living in this hell. Go on.
Yeah. Well, no, I just heard you say when you started telling me about this Sherpa woman, something about how special the indigenous people are. I want to say this. Even though, Vinnie, we're all living in this modern world with our cell phones and our technology here that's letting us even have this conversation, we can still live like our indigenous ancestors. We can still live in a way in harmony with nature, with our circadian rhythm, in a way that nourishes us deeply and much more profoundly than any virtual entertainment or fast food can do. And I consider all of that, by the way, part of our diet. It's not just what we consume and what goes into our digestive tract, it's the information we get from videos, from TikTok, from books that we read, from the people around us. It's all informing who we are. So I suggest, like the foundation does as well, the Weston A Foundation, that people look to the past to regain the good health that is their birthright. And I can share a few of the ideas that the foundation offers and that I do too that will help us live ancestrally in a modern world.
Hang on to that thought. We're going to come right back to that. But first, I need to tell you guys about purevitaminclub.com. Now, why can I talk about this company the way I talk about it? Well, because I own the company. I started the company from scratch because after my first round of chemo back in 2007, I looked around at everything that went into my body. I couldn't believe that I even got cancer. And when I would look at my vitamins, I would see things like titanium dioxide and magnesium stearate and psyllium and just different things that shouldn't be in vitamins, right? I mean, titanium dioxide, even in nanoparticles, can cause colon cancer. Come on, folks. You're taking vitamins to be healthy. The other thing I found out is that they're not giving you the best version of the vitamins. You want to take methylated B vitamins. They don't give you that. And when you buy even the high-end stuff, you're not getting the good stuff. They're cutting costs. Well, guess what? At purevitaminclub.com, we do not have bean counters. I started this company with my own money. That's right. And I'm the only bean counter here. And guess what I don't do? I don't count beans. I put out the best possible vitamins on the planet. So if you want the best possible vitamins ever made at the lowest price, go to purevitaminclub.com right now and get everything from multicaps to ultra salt. And look, the Badwater 135 is coming up in about 10 weeks. People are buying my ultra salt like there's no tomorrow. It's the hottest rates on the planet. They start and there's over 120 degrees when they're out there. What are they taking to hydrate? They're taking ultra salt along with their water. So go check out purevitaminclub.com. We're talking about the lady who does a podcast on that Weston A. Price Foundation site, Wise Traditions podcast. We're talking to Hilda Labrada Gore. Hilda, what are the things that you guys go back into what you were talking about just a minute ago?
I will. So I wanted to touch base on how we can live in our modern worlds more ancestrally, how we can nourish ourselves deeply on all the levels. And I'll start with the Weston A. Price Foundation. So at least a couple of times I've mentioned Dr. Price, but I haven't gone into it. But basically, he wanted to see, are there healthy people on this planet? And if so, what are they eating? He suspected that there was a link between nutrition and not only oral health. Obviously, being a dentist, he was very curious about the teeth and room for all the teeth in the jaw and so forth, but also overall health. So he found untouched people groups. He went everywhere from the South Sea Pacific Islands to Scotland to Alaska to Kenya to Peru. And he found that people had different diets. Obviously, in Switzerland, it was a lot of dairy and rye sourdough bread. And in Kenya, it was meat and milk and blood. All the diets were different, but they had things in common. They were all the healthy people were eating local, organic, seasonal, traditional foods. So they were eating what was available to them there and single ingredient foods. In other words, they didn't have to look for the ingredient list and all the weird things in there because they didn't have a list. It was just the meat and the milk and the blood and the bread that they had made themselves. So he wrote a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration to encourage people. And get this, Vinny, this was like 100 years ago, but he was trying to tell his friends and everyone he knew, hey, we're already seeing these modern foods creep in, and we need to do what we can to stay well by going back, looking at what served our ancestors well and eating that way. So that's the book that he wrote. And then Sally Fallon Morell, so many years later, actually, she was born in the very hospital in which Dr. Price died. Get this.
Wow.
The last words on Dr. Price's lips were, you teach, you teach, you teach. And then Sally Fallon Morell was born. And this is so fascinating. So she kind of picked up the torch. She grabbed the baton if we were in a race for a good well-being, and she grabbed that baton from him and she established a foundation in his name called the Weston A. Price Foundation. And they have 11 principles, just to summarize real quick, that are trying to help us understand what were the things in common of all these diets, apart from what I said, local, organic, seasonal, and traditional. Like they all had plenty of salt. You were mentioning salt earlier. Mm-hmm. Salt was valued and appreciated for helping cognitive function and all the things. People think now, oh, I've got to keep my sodium down. They have no idea. So we're big on salt, eating nose to tail, eating nutrient-dense foods. So we're not just filling up on whatever, but we're eating foods that give us the biggest bang for our buck and things like that.
Well, it's interesting. I like that you mentioned that Weston A. Price was doing this 100 years ago, right? And look, there was a saying back in the day: "He's worth his salt." Right? Salt.
Yes.
We words come from somewhere, right? And we've lost that, and it's like people don't wonder where words come from. But when he's worth his salt, that meant something, right? Not anymore. Right. They tell you, and I just did a whole podcast on hydration and sodium and salt. You see, we think that the sodium that you get in fake products, right, on the market is the same as eating the sodium and salt, right? And it's not even close, right? And I go out of my way to buy good salts, right? Like I'll get the Baja salt, I'll get Malden salt, and my product, I contracted with the people over in Redmond, Utah.
I love
Um,
them.
yeah, but we use them in my product. Two of my products, my ultra fat food, I make a fat product, and my ultra salt, both use their salt in the product because it's one of the top salts on the planet, and it's right here in the United States. And I'm not saying that because we use it.
Right.
The other one that's in North America is, like I mentioned, Baja salt, right?
Yes.
It's got almost, or maybe a few more nutrients even than the 60 or 80 that's in. I know more about salt than most people know.
I see
Right?
that you do.
Right?
And I was just thinking, it's not just food that's ultra processed. So our salt has been like kind of stripped of its trace minerals, if it had any to begin with. It depends on where it came from, of course. And then we add some anti-caking agents so it pours easily. And we've kind of messed it up just like all the regular food. So what you want to do is find well-sourced salt. What I like about Redmond, actually, it comes from a mine. So it's like this dry seabed that's been underground for the longest time. So there's no microplastics in it. I mean, yeah, we could go on and on about salt, but there's just the same thing with beef or chicken. Like you need to find the best source possible. And this is actually one thing I like about the Weston A. Price Foundation. So they help people find local farms and sources of real food. They've got chapters all around the world. People can just go to the website, westonaprice.org. And I'm not paid to say this, by the way. I'm just telling you what's helped me. And you look and see if there's a chapter leader near your city and say, hey, where can I find real food? And they will send you a list that will include farmers markets, of course, but also local farms that are doing things the regenerative way. And so this means that their cows are not, shot up with antibiotics or growth hormone, or, you're not getting some mix of cows in your hamburger meat, except for the cows from that farm. It's crazy what's happened in the industry. So to get well, I think we need to be intentional in a way that our ancestors maybe didn't have to worry about.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just looking to see if I could find it. I was going to hold it up on the camera. I've actually been down in the salt mines at Redlands, below the
Ah,
earth where it comes from. I actually know the people because
yes.
a girl that I grew up with on the bayou, name is Leslie. She moved to Salina, Utah, which is right next to Redmond, Utah. It's right there on the 70, just a mile away, the
Uh-huh.
two towns, right? And I remember going there back in the 80s and 90s to visit Leslie and her husband. And they only had Redmond salt on all the tables, and everyone just lauded the salt because it tasted so much different, right? And then when I had to do my own company and I had to find the best salt in the world, it's like, well, I think I know where it is. And
Yes.
I went straight to Redmond and cut a deal with those guys, and they took me down to the mines. I have big rock salts that I took out of that mine here in the house, and
That's so
I'll look at
fun.
them every now and again. That's how much I believe in salt. You mentioned 100 years ago with Weston A. Price, but if you go back probably 50 years before him, I'm going to say to 1863,
Hmm.
that's when William Banting wrote the letter on corpulence, right? Explaining
Yes.
how one man lost weight, right? It was just one man. It was an in-one experiment. He's going, look, all I did was cut out bread and pasta and processed foods,
Yep.
and the weight all just melted off, right? It's
Yep.
it's so crazy as to how simple it is to do, right? Yet we
Agreed.
turn it into everyone wants to turn everything into a diet, and I get it. Everyone wants to get paid, right? They want to turn everything, oh,
Mm.
you got to do my diet, or do this, and you'll lose weight. If you just follow what Weston A. Price is talking about, you can get rid of a lot of your diseases and a lot of your problems. I'm going to send you a copy for free because we charge $10 for it now. I wrote, I'll tell you how it went. I wrote a book called Fitness Confidential,
Uh-huh.
and the book became a wild success, like beyond my wildest dreams.
Wow.
It changed my life, right, in ways you can't imagine. And the book is now 12 or 13 years old. It still sells.
Mm.
There's still a market out there picking up this book. Well, I realized about a year or two after the book came out, when the big money was being made on the book and my life was changing overnight, I woke up one night in a cold sweat and I said, okay, I, I wrote this book. I wrote it. You know how they say dance as if no one will ever see you dance?
Yes.
I wrote a book that I didn't think anyone was going to read.
Oh.
And then it spent like a year and a half at the top of Amazon and just
Wow.
went nuts. And I woke up in a cold sweat and I said, I wrote about what was wrong and I forgot to tell people what to do.
Mm.
I didn't give a prescription in the book. So the next day I woke up and I pulled out a pen. Believe it or not, I'll show you one right here. I write in fountain pens. I wrote my book
Wow.
in fountain pen, right?
Ah.
Um, because with fountain pens, you have to pay attention. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be deliberate when you're writing, right? There's no, let me erase that, let me go back, right? You're writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote my entire book with a fountain pen. I don't think
Whoa.
people even know what that is nowadays. So I pulled out one of my trusty fountain pens, and I probably have 100 of them here. And I sat down, and in about 4 hours, I jotted out the part of the book I forgot to put in the book.
Oh.
And it came, once my wife typed it up, it came to 26 pages typewritten. And I put that up on my website and gave it away for free.
Mm.
300,000 people got it for free.
Whoa.
Right. So I said, I'm going to just keep giving it away for free because these people probably bought my book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at some point, I decided to put a $10 charge on it because what we figured out was if you charge even $1 for something, people will take it more seriously.
That's true.
Right. So I
Mm-hmm.
want people to take it serious. So I will send you a copy of that. And it's not very far off from what Price was talking about way back in
Sure.
the day.
Sure. Oh my
Right.
gosh, I would love to see that. And you're right. We overcomplicate it. Like we said, we outsource our in wisdom. I'm sure you're offering a lot of common sense thing that people are like, why didn't I think of that? But it's like you're the nudge, you're the little catalyst to get people thinking about these things. I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but when I first got interested in this health stuff and actually working with the Weston A. Price Foundation, it's because they sent me to Kenya. A Maasai warrior, Vinnie, had contacted the foundation and he said, please send someone over. We're all getting sick. These are the Maasai, like they're the like
They're
hale
built
and
like,
hardy,
yeah,
tall.
yeah, they're amazing human beings.
Absolutely. And so he said, I have diabetes. He said, my wife has asthma. And he came across some of the work of Weston Price, which was pointing people to live more like their ancestors, to nourish themselves deeply and so forth. He's like, I can tell my tribe, but I think it would be better if someone from far away came because, like most people, you know, your own hometown doesn't really celebrate you or listen to you. So I got to go over there. This was in 2015. And I met an elder in the tribe and I grabbed my phone and I pushed voice memo. I thought this man must have some stories. Let me ask him through a translator about what he ate as a child, what he did when he got sick. And his answers started me on this trajectory of like, I've got to keep traveling and learning more. And because I said, what did you eat as a child? He said, whatever we could catch, because they were hunters and nomadic people and they would have their cattle, but they were also just trying to get what they could from the forest there where they lived in the Masai Mara. And then when I asked him, what did you do when you got sick when you were a child? He said, we never got sick. And my jaw like nearly touched the floor. I was like, wait, what? He's like, we never got sick. He said, if we ever felt a shiver coming on, we would just drink milk from the cow. And he demonstrated drinking it straight from the udder. And I was like, oh my goodness, this man, he is a treasure trove of information. And he, with him and my presence there, what wasn't, I don't want to say with my presence there, but it was like the little nudge or catalyst that you were and have been with your book. I spoke to him and to some of the tribal elders, and they committed by the end of my visit. They said, we're going to begin eating once again our traditional diets, what has served us since the beginning of time. Because I said, please don't eat our way. In the United States, we've kind of messed it all up. I said, eat your way. And so it was beautiful to see that commitment and that kind of U-turn, avoiding a perilous future, the one we're in right now, where chronic disease, obesity, diabetes, all these things are up, you know, because people have sacrificed their health on the altar of convenience.
Well, speaking of what you just said, I'll try anything for the audience within reason. Like I won't do anything stupid. I won't eat processed foods and this kind of thing. I've been a one ingredient food eater for so long. It's not, I've been into this health game my entire life.
Nice.
And I noticed when I moved from California, my wife and I were out in California for 31 years. We moved to Central Virginia right before the pandemic.
Mm.
And I noticed every spring, I don't get allergies. I'm not an allergy person at all. My my wife will suffer a little bit with the sniffy this and the dry throat that, But I started noticing after I moved here, there's so much pollen in the air. I mean, you go kayaking and the top of the water, you could just see the glaze of pollen. And I noticed that even though nothing else happens to me, I would feel like a tickle in my throat or a little burning in my throat during pollen season. Um, Bill Schindler started coming. Do you know Bill
I
Schindler?
do.
Yeah, he's not far from you. He's right over in Maryland
That's
somewhere.
right.
Bill was on the show a while back. I had him in my last documentary for a minute or two. He's been on the show a few times, and he started on me about raw milk. And I would listen to Bill. I would listen to other people talk about raw milk, and I would kind of halfway poo-poo the idea and go, geez, who needs listeria? And can I talk this to my audience? And this kind of thing, right? So I would go, all right, yeah, Bill, if you're getting fresh raw milk from someone, but I'm not going to go chance this. And then someone else started talking to me about raw milk, and raw
Mhm.
milk just kept coming up. Well, finally, I had a guy from California. God, I wish I could remember his name. He was just on the show a few weeks ago. I don't
Maybe
think
Mark McAfee?
Mark McAfee, thank you. And Mark McAfee went down this road explaining where listeria came from and why it started, and just the whole history of what was going on when we all moved to the cities and people are walking around in cow shit while they're trying to, milk cattle and the whole thing. And and we haven't needed to boil milk or pasteurize it for a gazillion years, but we still do it. So he convinced me.
Mm.
And he tells me, you got to go out and there's a place near you, right? And I think the one I go to, this is not an ad, folks. It's called Greenbrook Farms, and they only do this area, right?
Okay.
They might even do your area. I'm not sure, but they're not far from me, and they ship to a local store. It's kind of a weird thing. Do you do raw milk at all?
I do.
Okay, so with us, it's illegal to buy raw milk in Virginia.
Okay.
And I know you're in DC. I don't know what your laws are. I'm going to ask you in a second. But so what you have to do is you call Creambrook and you buy into the cow.
That's right.
And it's like $10 or $15. So now you give them $10 or $15 and now you own a piece of a cow. Now you can drink your own raw milk, right?
That's right.
That's how you skirt the law. And so then I go by this place, right, in a shopping mall. They sell other kitchen supplies and everything else. I go there once a week and pick up my raw milk. Now, I'm not much of a milk drinker. My wife is British, so she puts a little milk in her tea every day.
Mm-hmm.
I promise to drink the rest of that half gallon at some point during the week. The reason I wanted to get their raw milk was because I wanted their raw cream and their raw kefir, because I'm a big yogurt guy.
Yeah.
So I'm getting their raw cream to put in my coffee and their raw kefir. I got to tell you, we're in the midst of just pollen everywhere. Not as much as a sniffle, not as much as a dry throat. So my question is, where did that go? I've been drinking raw milk now for a month or 5 weeks. I've been finishing the gallon. I've been drinking my cream. I've been eating the kefir. Gone. Right. So does
Wow.
that mean other inflammation and other histamines are operating the way they're supposed to operate?
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm an N1 experiment, but I know that I started feeling something in every other year. We're having a bad pollen season, yet I don't have any symptoms whatsoever. Any thoughts? I know you're not a doctor, but any thoughts?
Oh my gosh. Well, my first thought is I'm not surprised because you're eating a local, whole, real food. You know, the whole pasteurization and homogenization systems are breaking down what's good in the milk. Some people say milk on the grocery store refrigerated section is actually a dead food. It's not living anymore. I'm sure Mark said that, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're eating something that's local and whole and real and good. And for people who are afraid of raw milk, I always say, the first milk you ever tasted as a baby, if your mother breastfed you, was your mother's milk. And by the way, that was raw. And so, in the
It was
same
from the
way,
also, right? There was no handling of it. It went from
that's
her
true.
to your lips right down the gullet.
That's true. That's true.
Right.
But that's why it's important to know your source, know your farmer. I know Mark is reliable, but also the Weston A. Price Foundation provides from their website, westonaprice.org. You can click on, like I said, find your local chapter leader to find sources of real food and also raw milk. So, in terms of the law in DC, Vinny, I have to be honest with you, I don't even know what the law is, but because I don't know if it's illegal only to sell it. So, I buy it from farmers in Pennsylvania. It gets delivered to Maryland where I pick it up and I bring it into DC. I don't know if that's breaking the law or not, but if someone wants to do a citizen's arrest, that's fine. To me, it's worth it because I think the raw milk is a wonderful, complete food and I drink it every day. That's the truth of it.
Yeah, I'm back to drinking milk again. And the other thing is, back whenever I would, because I don't like to waste food. And like I said, I'm not a big milk drinker, but my wife would buy enough to put in her tea every day because that's what we couldn't do.
Hmm.
If it was getting down and it was starting to smell, I
Yeah.
would drink the rest of it and immediately get this mucusy feeling in my throat, this mucusy thing going on in my adenoids and in my nothing. Nothing. I'm finishing off a half a gallon of milk. I get two things of kefir. Nothing. My
Wow.
digestive system is feeling even better. Just all the way around, just a feeling of well-being. And this is not an ad, folks, because Creambrook cannot deliver to you guys. And I know there's a guy right now in Pennsylvania. I don't know if you've been following the story. He's an
Who?
Amish guy that they're trying to stop from selling
Mm,
his raw milk, right? It's like the government is going after this guy, hook, line, and sinker, for no reason because he's selling
yeah.
raw milk in Pennsylvania, right?
Really, the truth is, if we are free people, we should be free to drink and eat the food that we so choose, even aware that there may be risks. Obviously, with any food, there's risks. But interestingly, if you go to the website realmilk.com, you can also find, actually, by the way, where there's milk delivered near you. But there's also a lot of data indicating that there have been more foodborne illnesses from processed foods like lettuce that you can find at Safeway, for goodness sakes, and burger meat that comes from only one of the 4 meat providers nationwide, on the big scale. So
Right.
what I prefer to do is to know my farmer, to shake their hand, to
Yeah.
know my source, so that if something does go south, I'll be like, okay, I know where this came from and I can avoid it in the future. And this is actually what Joel Salatin says. He's a friend of mine too, that I've gotten to know through the podcast. I know, Vinny, you've made lots of connections too, but Joel is always like, why can't we have the freedom and the trust and let the market decide? If I get my customers sick, I'm going to get a bad reputation. People are not going to come to my farm and buy my meat, my milk, and my eggs. But if I'm doing a good job, then word of mouth is going to grow and grow my business. He's like, that's how it should be. Like, the government should get their hands off our food.
Yeah. Joel is right down the road from me. I've been invited to the lunatic tour several times. Every time I've been invited, I have to be somewhere else in the country or the world.
Oh,
Which,
oh,
and he's right down the road from me, right? So yeah,
mm.
and by the way, his meat is amazing. We do buy Joel's products. So it's all very interesting. Any thoughts? I know this might be a bit of a wives' tale. I tell people don't eat sugar and grains, so I stay
Mm.
away from honey because it's sugar. But there's this whole thing about during allergy season telling people to consume local honey because that will actually, any truth to that or anything you know about that?
Yes, I actually was going to say that when you were talking about being allergy symptom free. Um, it makes sense to me that nature has a remedy near where there may be a problem. So I don't know if you're aware of this, Vinny, but where poison ivy grows, often there is an equivalent plant that's the antidote to the poison ivy, itchiness. This is so fascinating to me. So if you're having struggles with allergies, why not go to the very bees that are making use of the pollen and so forth and spreading it around? Go to the bees for the solution. Now, I have local honey, and I actually love a little bit every day if I can with my olive oil when my day is getting started.
Yeah.
So, but I can't speak to the science behind it, but I love that you keep saying you're an N of one, because I
Right.
think people should pay attention to their own bioindividuality and experiment on themselves. Any influencer or podcaster can say, hey, try this, try that. But until you try it yourself, you don't really know, is this going to work for me? And I always keep in mind too, Vinnie, that I'm not the same age and stage of some of the folks that I encounter. So I take what they say with a grain of salt and then I apply it. And if it works for me, great. And if it doesn't, then I let it go. But I don't need to put all my confidence, as I was saying earlier, all my confidence and all my trust, outsourcing my health when I know my body best and my body will tell me what's best for me. But I do love honey, and it is sugar, but it's a natural sugar and it's a wonderful way to sweeten any kind of dessert or
Don't even
meal.
get me started about natural sugar. And you see, you got to remember, I talk to people who are, I'm a sugar addict. That's why I stay away from it, right?
Oh.
And I work, with morbidly obese people on a daily basis. People set up phone calls. I have something called the VIP group where
Mm.
we all talk about it. It's almost like our own little AA group,
Mm-hmm.
right? So people are, you're a friend of Vinnie's? You don't get that reference, right? Friend of Bill's?
No, but
Any
I
AA
see.
person will get the joke. Anyway, so some people have to just abstain from sugar altogether, whether
Mhm.
it's honey or anything else, because saying that sugar is natural honey, well, sugar is natural sugar too. It's all cocaine is
Mm.
natural, right? It's like, it doesn't mean it's good for you. Hang on just a second. I want to change the tune of this conversation just a little bit. But first, you just heard Hilda mention something about olives. And as you know, it's my favorite fruit. And it's also my favorite fruit juice. That means olive oil. That's right. It's the only fruit juice that's an oil. Well, I guess avocados have their own oil too. So maybe I'm lying. But in this country, in the good old US of A, you are able to cut oil up to 40% and still call it 100% pure olive oil. That's a fact, folks. They're putting seed oils in your olive oil. Now it doesn't even taste like olive oil, so they have to add a flavor back in or an odor of some sort. And it doesn't even look like olive oil, so they have to add a colorant. So, we were talking about one ingredient foods. Olive oil in this country goes from one ingredient to a ton of ingredients. There's one way to avoid that. Well, you could go learn about different olive oils, or you could just listen to me and go get Villa Capelli olive oil. We use it at my company, purevitaminclub.com, because you have to hook vitamin D3 to an oil. Most people hook it to the cheapest seed oil they can, rapeseed oil. Not us. We hook it to Villa Capelli olive oil. So when you're getting my D3, you're getting the best oil on the planet. Go to Villa Capelli. If they're out, because they won't sell any oil unless it's their own oil. They don't import it from Spain. If it's not coming off of their trees in Puglia, they ain't selling it. It's just the way it is. Put your name on the list. And when they're back in stock, I'm telling you, get 2 3-liter tins. I know that's like almost 2 gallons of olive oil. I get it. But trust me, put it in a cool, dark place. It'll stay good forever. Villa Capelli olive oil. Let them know we sent you. Put in promo code Vinnie, VINNIE. You'll save 10% every time. If you spend over $140 and then you put in the Vinnie discount, you'll be at $126, which puts you $1 over where you need to be to get free shipping. So spend $140 at Villa Capelli, get the free shipping, get the Vinnie discount. Bada bing, bada boom. We are talking to the woman from the Weston A. Price Foundation's podcast, Hilda Labrada Gore. Hilda, let's talk about podcasting. When did you start? Why did you start? And tell me about your love or hate of podcasts.
Okay. Well, I kind of started because I'm a competitive girl, Vinnie, and I was leading a band at the time. And the 14-year-old violinist said, I'm starting a podcast. I was like, hold on. If he can start a podcast, I can start a podcast. I've always been a communicator. So I wanted to avail myself of this new medium. But I wanted to partner with the Weston A Price Foundation because when I found out about them, I was like, this stuff is good. After I talked to that Maasai elder in Kenya, I came back and I got a meeting with Sally Fallon Morell, the president of the Weston A Price Foundation. I said, you should have a show. I can host and produce it. To my surprise, she said yes. This was in 2015. We launched the show in 2016. I don't think Sally knew what she was getting into. The cool thing is, Vinnie, the Wise Traditions podcast now consistently appears in the top 150 of health and fitness podcasts on the Apple Podcast charts because the content is so good. In the early days, it sounded like I was recording in a bathroom, like it was not
Right.
cute, but the content was still so good. I've interviewed Dr. Tom Cowan and Natasha Kimmel McBride. I started with the heavy hitters, Joel Salatin, and I've interviewed Bruce Lipton and Zach Bush and so many luminaries, like you said at the start of this show, that it's been an amazing, phenomenal ride. And the coolest thing to me is because the foundation is about food, farming, and the healing arts, we can cover a broad range of topics. So it's not just food, it's regenerative farming, like I said, agriculture, but also alternative ways of healing. We've talked about biofield tuning with a tuning fork. And recently I interviewed the Beagleson brothers, whose father wrote a book about holographic blood. Like this
Wow.
stuff is fascinating. And I just feel like I have the privilege of being in the front row seat of like a university class on alternative and ancestral health 101. And I'm just loving every bit of it. And apparently the audience is too.
Yeah, I feel that way about my Friday show because I've been bringing people like you, and I'm learning something on every single Friday show. It's my favorite show to do.
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing about podcast. I had I had three doctors around my dinner table on Saturday night. One was a professor of economics, and the other two were MDs. One was an MD, but also an epidemiological doctor here at the university. And we're having this conversation, and I can always rattle stuff off from the top of my head. Right, I don't have to go Google, as they say. I'm not sitting at my own table Googling things. Right,
Yeah.
and I want to learn from smart people, way smarter than me. And I was bringing things up, and they were pulling their phones out, and I was like, "Well, how do you know this stuff? Where are you
Ah,
learning this stuff?" And I said, "Look, I have the best Google in the world. They show up every Friday on my show." And to their admission, all three of these people listen to the podcast. These are one PhD and two MDs. And they admit it. Yeah, we do listen to the Friday show for that one reason, to hear people like you, right? And doing this on Fridays for 13 years, you get to learn a lot. And when you don't hear it once and you don't hear it twice, but you hear it 10 or 12 or 15 times, right?
yeah.
When you have everyone from Lustig to, Nina's almost became my co-host at one time, Nina Teich.
Wow.
Yeah, we just all sit around and talk. Gary Taubes in the early days, right?
Yes.
And by the way, both of those people, along with Bill Schindler, I think Nina and Taubes have been in three of my documentaries.
Wow.
Three of the four, maybe. Yeah, three of the four.
That's fabulous. Oh, they're wonderful people. You're right. I do want to answer your question about what I don't like. I think it's more work than people think. Actually, you think, oh, the person just grabs a microphone and get going. No, I mean, I do, my research. You've got to contact the guests. There's like a lot of bits and pieces, and this is why, actually, for a while, I was a podcast coach, Vinnie, and I told people do seasons, give yourself a break because, like you, I've been week in, week out, putting out episodes, and it's a lot to never miss a Monday, and I haven't in 10 years, which is fabulous, but it's a lot of work. So I say, if you can, do your show in seasons. So just like, Game of Thrones or something, you got season 1, take a break for the summer, do some other stuff, come back, do season 2. It gives you a chance to build up your repertoire because most people do podcasts as a hobby. And for me, the hobby has turned it into a jobby, but I do love it, but it is some work for sure.
Yeah, it never ends. Now, let me ask you this. Let's say your podcast ended up on Christmas Day. Do you do a podcast?
Oh, well, I release them. I prep them ahead of time. So they release every Monday.
Yeah, no matter what.
Every Monday, no matter what. Yep.
You're like we are. People go, wow, you put one out on New Year's Eve and, you put one out on Christmas Eve and it doesn't matter.
Yep.
3 times a week, it does not matter. The holidays, everything. When everyone takes a break, ours just keep coming out, keep coming
That's
out. Keep
right.
coming
That's
out.
right. And
And
it's helpful. It's a resource for everyone. Like you said, your two MDs and the PhD, like everybody. And this is what I love too, actually, particularly about the work I do for the Weston A. Price Foundation, though, like I said, on my own, I'm like Dora the Explorer. I'm like, let me see who is out there still. I'm learning from all these people. But most of the wisdom I learn can be tapped whether you have, all the education in the world or none whatsoever, because living is an education, right? And so that's why personally I talk about, getting plenty of sunshine, which our ancestors did. People forget that natural light is nourishment too. It's like a multivitamin in the sky, and prioritizing sleep and even shivers. I talk about it, experiencing the environment to stimulate your mitochondria. So there's just so much I've learned that comprises well-being. This is one reason I go by Holistic Hilda too. But my favorite thing, Vinnie, like I'm saying, is that it's all very accessible. The only thing of my, what I call 6 ancestral secrets that costs anything is food. And that is worth every penny, because if you invest, like you were talking about the olive oil, if people invest in the best, they're not going to have to see the doctor because they're so nourished. You only go to the doctor if you're sick, right? But if you're well nourished, you're paying your, farmer instead of your doctor. It's a wonderful, wonderful system for your body and for your well-being, and actually for the local economy too.
we will make that the final word. By the way, folks, she's had all of those great people in her podcast, but she's never had me, which is a problem.
Hey,
It's,
I'll work on it, Vinnie. I'll work on it. I'm not in charge. I'm just making it for
I
the
know.
foundation. But I'll
And
work
by the
on
way, folks, I shouldn't have done that to you,
it.
because Hilda is not in charge. I'm probably not of the ilk that can end up on Weston A. Price's podcast, but who cares? Well, I care because it won't have me on.
Let's see. We'll do what we can, Vinnie. We'll do what we can.
Have you had Nina on?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so have you had Zoe Harcombe?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you had Gary Taubes? Has he been on?
No, we have not had Gary.
Okay, so all right, me and Gary, we're in a club ourselves. Okay, good. Because those are my 3 favorite guests. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Zoe comes on whenever I can get her on. Like, I have regulars that come on over. Have you ever had Dr. Tim Noakes?
Yes.
He's another one of my favorites.
He's wonderful. All the people you've mentioned are wonderful. I'm sure Gary's wonderful and you're wonderful. By the way, if someone's listening right now and they're like, I haven't been on the show either, it's like, no, of course, everyone's got something
Gary
to share.
and I are not as wonderful as Nina and Zoe because we've not been on the show. I'm going to write to Tim Noakes after this and go, dude, you've been on and I haven't. He's been, God, like in the early shows, Tim would come on like once every 3rd month. And when he was going through the trial, remember the big trial?
I do.
Trial? He had a podcast at the time. I went on and started co-hosting his podcast. I ran his podcast while he was going through the trials.
Wow.
Yeah, we all go way back in this podcast game.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I love those guys. Hang on, you got to hang on because we have to upload this thing. Folks, you know what to do. We all go shopping on Amazon. Before you go to Amazon, go to VinnieTortorich.com, click through the banner. It puts a little coal on the fire, gets my train down the track. We're able to keep this show free for a gazillion years in a row. Rate and review the podcast. And most off, go listen to Wise Traditions podcast. That is Hilda Labrada Gore's podcast. I've listened to a few episodes. Is excellent. Yeah, they won't have me on, but that's okay. If you guys want to hear me, you can come right here and listen to my muddly voice over here. So, on behalf of Hilda Labrada Gore, my name is Vinnie Tortorich. Put life into living and do it with enthusiasm.